Okay, so now for part 2, we have to simplify these and find the non-permissible values. Okay, so first of all, this is, so they all have even number coefficients, so we can just take out 2 from there. So this is going to give us 2 can go out, 10 becomes 5, 4 becomes 2, and so we got a squared over 5a squared minus 2a, and we know that we have a in everything, so we can take that out too. So this is going to be equal to a over 5a minus 2. So this is the simplified version. And from this thing, we see that a cannot be equal to what? 0 and 2 over 5. And that is because if you try to split up 10a squared minus 4a, this is going to be equal to a times 10a minus 4. And so that means that a cannot be 0. And because of this, a cannot be 4 over 10. But 4 over 10 is the same thing as 2 over 5, right? So a cannot be 0 and 2 over 5. That's what this thing says. For number b, so 5b squared minus 15b over 5b squared. Okay, so first of all, what you see is the 5s, right? You see 5s in everywhere, right? So you can take the 5 out, take the 5 out, and this becomes 3. So it's b squared minus 3b over b squared. This equals b minus 3 over b. And so this is the simplified version. And if you want to the non-permissible values, then 5b squared just doesn't have to be 0, right? So that just can't be 0. That means b cannot be 0. So that is our restriction. Number C, 4x squared minus 20x minus 200 over negative x squared plus 25. Okay, so this one's kind of tricky because you have to recognize that this is just the same thing as 25 minus x squared, which is basically square minus square, right? So difference of squares, because 25 is actually 5 squared, right? 5 squared minus x squared. So this becomes 5 plus x times 5 minus x, right? So you had to recognize that. So this is going to be equal to 5 plus x, 5 minus x. That's going to be the denominator. And our numerator, that's going to be, so first of all, we see that we can take out 4, right? So if we just take out 4, then that's going to be x squared, and then minus 20 divided by 4 is 5, right? So it's going to be 5x, and then this divided by 4, that's going to be 50, right? So minus 50, and then we can factor that, right? So if we factor this, this becomes, the denominator is the same, and the numerator becomes 4 times, and then we can factor x squared minus 5x minus 50 into minus 10 and 5. Therefore, it becomes x minus 10, x plus 5, right? And so that means that these two cancel, and this is all that's left. So our answer becomes 4 times x minus 10 over 5 minus x, and that is our answer. As for our non-permissible values, this just cannot be 0. That means this can't be 0. That means x cannot be 5 or negative 5. So x cannot be plus or minus 5. And so that's our restriction. Like that. For number D, so first thing you see here is you want to take out the 4 here, right? So this becomes, let's just deal with the denominator first, and then we'll get to the numerator. If we take the 4 out, then we see that it becomes z squared minus 4, right? So it's z squared minus 4, and then this is also difference of squares, right? So this becomes z plus 2, that's z and 2 surrounds, they look very similar. Z plus 2, z minus 2. I hate z because it looks so much like 2. So we have 4 and then z plus 2, z minus 2. And then now we can get to this side. And then we notice that 3, 15, and 42, they're all multiples of 3, right? So if we take the 3 out, it's going to be 3 times z squared. That's obvious. And then plus 15 is 3 times 5. That's why it becomes 5z, right? And the minus 42 divided by 3, that's going to be 42 is 7. So it's minus 14 like that, right? So if you see 14 times 3 equals 42. And then let's try to factor this if we can. And this becomes 7 and minus 2. Okay, so that was easy. We can do z minus 2, z plus 7, right? Z minus 2. Oh, I'll actually write the whole thing different. This is going to be 3 times z plus 7, z minus 2 over 4z plus 2, z minus 2. Oh, yeah. So these two cancel, and then and that's the only one that's left. So this is our answer. Let's try to write that again. 3z plus 7 over 4z plus 2. And so that's our answer. And as for our non-permissible values, this cannot be 0. That means this cannot be 0. That means z cannot be -2 or +2, right? Plus or minus. Okay, z cannot be plus or minus 2. So that's our answer. Yeah, that's our restriction. And for number E, c to the 4th power minus 49d squared, under that, right? And so first let's deal with the denominator. Notice that the denominator is also a difference of squares, because c to the 4th power, this is c to the, that's c squared, and then this is 7d, the whole thing squared, right? So basically, let's deal with the denominator. Then that becomes c squared plus 7d times c squared minus 7d. And then this one, that becomes, you see, this is kind of in the form of a square plus 2ab plus b square, right? And we know that this is equal to a plus b square. And so in this case, a is going to be c squared, right? And then b is going to be 7d. And 2 times a times b, that becomes 14c squared d pretty quickly, right? And so we can now see that this thing is equal to c squared plus 7d squared, right? And if you actually want to try this out, you can actually expand that. That's going to be c squared squared, so that's going to be c to the 4th power, plus 2 times c squared times 7d, so that's going to be 14c squared d, right? 14c squared d. And then plus 7d squared, that's going to be 49d squared. This is the same thing as this, and there's your proof, right? And so now we see that this and this is the same, so we can take one of them off. So this gives us, so that gives us c squared minus 7d under c squared plus 7d, and here we have our answer. As for the non-permissible values, right? So as for the non-permissible values, this cannot be 0, right? That means c squared plus 7d cannot be 0, and c squared minus 7d cannot be 0. Therefore, c squared cannot be plus or minus 7d, right? Right, because if c squared is plus 7d, then this becomes 0, and if c squared is minus 7d, then this becomes 0, right? Okay, so c squared cannot be plus minus 7d, and you can't say, oh, it has to be plus, because c squared is always going to be plus. And that's because we don't know what d can be, right? D can be like -3. Then we'll need minus to make, then if this becomes minus, then c squared can be that, and we don't want that to happen, right? And so changing this up a bit, putting square roots, so c cannot be plus minus root plus minus 7d. Okay, so this is kind of confusing, right? And that's because if you just try to think of plus minus 7d as just one red blob, right? Then c squared cannot be that red blob. That means c cannot be, and so that means c cannot be plus or minus the square root of that red blob, right? I hope you guys get this. If c is plus or minus the red blob, then if we square both of these, right, then if it's plus square root red blob, then it's going to turn out to just be red blob. And also, if it's minus square root red blob, it's also going to be red blob, right? And so that's why we need the plus minus in the front here, right? And so that's why this thing is kind of weird. This has 2 plus minuses. And so this is our very weird and bizarre non-permissible values. Lastly, number F. So this was a typo. This shouldn't be D. Yeah, that can't be D. That should be E, right? So that should be E. And let's try to solve this thing. So basically, numerator first again. We see that we can take out e to the 4th power, right? So it's e to the 4th power times e to the 6th power plus 3, like that. And then up here, try to treat e to the 6 as one single variable, and then you'll notice that e to the 12 is just e to the 6 squared, right? And so this gives us that we can factor this into e to the 6 plus 2 times e to the 6 plus 3, right? And then if you try to expand this, you get e to the 12, and then 2 and 3, so you get 5 e to the 6, and then you get plus 6, which is basically what was here, right? And so let's transfer this over here like that. And then we see something amazing happening. These two cancel out. And so that leaves us with e to the 4th power and then e to the 6 plus 2. So this is our answer. And for our non-permissible values, these just don't have to be 0, right? So these can't be 0. E cannot be 0 because of this thing. And because of this thing, e to the 6th power cannot be equal to -3. And obviously, e to the 6th power is always going to be a positive number. Why? Because 6 is even. And so because 6 is even, e to the 6th power is always going to be 0 or above. That means it can't be -3, so this is kind of obvious. And so this is our only restriction. E cannot be 0. So that's our only non-permissible value. And that was it for part 2, and I hope you understood.